Hello and welcome to Top of the World. 3 hours ago we left this building, head towards the city in the south. I got an appointment, have my eyes tested and get some glasses. Can't see a thing. Anyway, 3 hours later, I've managed to shoehorn the van, somehow, inside. The reason being is we were driving down the road, minus 27, minus 29, and the van was struggling. There was something not quite right. Anyway, when we got into the first town down south, the temperature gauge plummeted. Just absolutely plummeted, and I knew something was wrong. I'm hoping this hasn't melted already. Oh, it has. Right, well, the top of the oil filler cap was frozen solid. Anyway, so we pulled through that town, gets down the road a bit more, and then a warning light comes up, engine failure, and we lost a turbo. Right, had no pull. So immediately found somewhere to turn around and sat there for a moment, pulled away, no turbo. I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes later, turbo kicks in. And it's running normally. So then I pull into a lay-by. I'll show you what I see. I'll turn the camera around. What I didn't show you was I did an oil change and air filter change on this just a couple of weeks ago. So the ice, right, can we see white in there? No. There was ice in this tube. I can see moisture. That might just be moisture because of the temperature. That's completely frozen under there still. And we can see an oil misting over here. Right, and there must be something's breathing heavily. What the fuck is that? What is that? Right. Well, I've never seen that before. Whatever that is, I've never seen that before. There should be something on that, shouldn't there? Well, that's where the oil's coming from. That's where it's breathing heavily from. Shouldn't that have something on it? Yeah. That doesn't explain why the turbo stopped working. It's working now, but that's where all that oil's coming from. So it was breathing really heavily, and you can see it's wet. There's traces of wet oil. Yeah, I'm fascinated by that. That looks like it's supposed to have something on it. Got that supposed to have a seal. Is there a thread in there? No. Definitely looks like there's supposed to be something on that, which isn't. But you can see it's oily, and it wasn't. Right, this is quite fresh. I was surprised when I did the service how dry and clean the engine is underneath here. And now I can see traces. I could see puffs of oil coming from out of there. And quite clearly there's fresh oil on my fingers, which there wasn't. So the engine's not breathing as it should do. And as I'm going down the road, I'm thinking, to be honest, I'm surprised a Ford Transit diesel is doing so well in the Arctic, even though it wasn't doing very well, and then it decided to not do really well. So we've done 200 kilometres, been nowhere, ended back up here. How I've managed to shoehorn that in there, I don't know. So what I'm going to do is let it warm up for a couple of hours. Yeah, I have just got that in there. And then I'm going to check the oil level, which I know was exactly right. Then I'm going to check the water level, which I know exactly right. And then by the looks of it, I'm going to take off that air box and dig into what's breathing heavily behind there. But the engine is breathing heavily. And when I took the fuel filler cap off, it was breathing heavily. How did it drive after the brain fart? Well, what happened was, firstly, the water temperature gauge dropped. I never seen that in a vehicle before. Anyway, it dropped rapidly as we stopped in a lay-by. And this was just to pour myself a cup of coffee. This was before all this happened. Anyway, after about, I don't know, 50, 60 miles, the warning light came on, it said engine failure, and quite clearly we'd lost the turbo. And the turbo's working again fine, and it's driven back another 80 miles without any problem at all. Which I'm kind of regretting, because boy do I need glasses. Anyway, this was my Christmas present. Sarah had made this appointment. We were going to the city to get my eyes tested and get some glasses, and here we are. Anyway, we'll let it warm up. All right, we're going to dig a little deeper now. So, fine joinery and mechanics, they don't mix. And I've been working on fine joinery this morning, and now I've got to put my gloves on so I don't get my hands impregnated with oil. Right, what do we know? Well, we know it's not a head gasket, because our oil level is spot on and our water level is spot on. So, having done a bit of research, right, well that's not good. That's not good at all. So that's not very well fixed into the turbo housing. Which shouldn't really surprise me. Anyway, we've got to get this effing great box out of here, this air box, which I'm sure is going to be a good enough challenge by itself. Well, there's no problem in there. And there's no problem there because it's a new one. I'll just put it in. There's a 10mm bulb holding that one. These pipes are clipped into it, all these pipes out of here. Pull them out. That's 10mm. Right, now we can see what's what. I'll get you in here. You see what's going on in there. Right, see that heavy breathing? Now I'm not saying that's related at all, because there are vehicles that just breathe heavily, and some of them can breathe heavily all their life. However, so this is the turbo actuator, this here. And that's obviously locked and it's electronic. So was there a problem, and it would have been a very temporary problem with that, was there a problem with the air? What was the problem that stopped the turbo temporarily running? And why is it breathing heavily? Now, yeah, it's breathing heavily for a while. This is not a, I don't know what's causing that, but I'm going to clean all that up. So what I do know, right, I'm going to have to touch. What I do know is this is not the first problem I've had with the van in -27. I had a Mercedes Sprinter, got a Mercedes Sprinter, and it went into limp mode the very first winter we was here, around the same temperatures. And I had a job getting it back. Anyway, when I got it back, once I diagnosed it, it was a sensor that was crushed. The water system didn't have enough glycol in it for -27. Anyway, overnight, somehow it crushed some sort of sensor which sent the engine into limp mode. That's not what's happened here. What's happened here is it threw an error message on the dash, which, of course, once cancelled, never came back. The turbo stopped. I went quarter of a mile, pulled into the end of a road, turned round, sat there for a moment, decided to head back north, drove for about a mile, pulled into this place where there was lots of lights, and the turbo was working, and there was no error lights, and I couldn't see nothing. So I don't think I got a major problem. This wasn't well connected to the turbo in there. Right, I don't know what that's about, but it wasn't. But if any of these sensors fail, or for some reason this got frozen, or the electronics had a fart because of the temperatures, that would explain this temporary issue. So after the temporary issue, I then drove back home another 120 kilometres. What's that, 80 miles? Faultless, absolutely faultless. But it did seem to be struggling on the way down there. It was just struggling. Was I surprised when the engine failure light came on? No, I wasn't. It was almost like I was expecting it because it was struggling. Do I think this may have been caused by the extreme low temperatures outside today? And it's got a block heater, and I got the cable for the block heater, and I set the timer to 5 a.m, even though I knew we were leaving at 6 a.m. I should have set the timer to 4 a.m. Well, when I went out at 5:10 this morning, it still hadn't kicked on. So in order to make sure the van was fully warmed, I actually started it at 5:30 with the block heater's only been on 20 minutes. Well, that won't have to do anything. It struggled to start. I think it's the cold. I think it just... The extreme Arctic conditions eventually kills most things, unless it's got, you know, pre-60s Volvo written on it. It kind of dies. But it's the modern complicatedness of these vehicles that gets killed by these temperatures. I'm going to clean up where it's heavy breathing there. I don't think the crankcase pressure is more than it should be. I'm not surprised. It's got the right levels of oil, right levels of water, and for the last 80, 90 miles it's driven, the turbo's been operating perfectly. I'm just going to clean it up, put it back together and say that it's good to go until it doesn't. So that's actually metal coloured, not black at all. So we've cleaned up the turbo actuator, cleaned up the best we can where this is all breathing heavily, so I can at least then determine how heavily it's breathing. Although it wasn't breathing too heavily out of here. So, you know, the bypass for the breather from the air filter comes into this en route to turbo. I'm surprised there's not a warm air feed for the air filter, but there isn't. So cold air comes straight into the cold box there. In the old days, right, on just about every Ford, GMC, so many cars in normal places. Have I got my light on? Yeah. You know, air filter used to have a summer and winter setting. So in the winter, the air filter used to have a little tube it used to go into, used to take the heat off the manifold to stop all this sort of stuff. Anyway, quite clearly, this doesn't. Cold air feed is this one here, right? Goes into the front there, extracts from there. So when that's -30, that's -30 going into the airbox. Well, that's not heating before it hits the turbo. So given the amount of moisture we've had here in the previous weeks, and I've showed you that, does that mean that every crevice has has filled up with, yeah, probably. And then the extreme temperatures today has just exacerbated it. I mean, it looks lovely outside, I've got to tell you. Stunning, right? No. Today there's no going outside and playing ball. Today outside it's whittles only. Right, that's it. Out, do your stuff, come in. Right. Let's put this back together then. And then we'll go from there, I guess. See, that's quite fascinating. Just before I put it back together, this is where the air box bolts into. There's a bolt missing from there. Common sense says go and find another bolt and put it in, don't ignore it. Let's do that. Editing marvels. New bolt washer. Easy. Alright. Why do I put that in there? Well, because it's obviously supposed to be in there, so something's going to vibrate sooner or later and break. Right. We clean up the airbox and put that back in. And then what we want to do is we want to get a much better fitting into the turbo housing at the end there. You can just see through between those pipes. The other end of that. Anyway, it was only just in there. See, that could do with cleaning as well, couldn't it? That's got... Perhaps I should take this out and clean it. Let's do that. This is the turbo feed pipe. Yeah, it's a bit already round there, but inside don't look too bad. Anyway, we clean it up. What we're going to do now is we're going to use the power of the camera to look inside the turbo. I'm going to flip it here, upside down. Right, and I'm hoping that is looking right inside the end of the turbo there. So for those of you who don't know how a turbo works, the set of splines you can't see runs off exhausts, runs off exhaust gases. And then they pressurise the set of turbines you can see, which take air from the front of the van down this tube. I suck it through this air box, cleaning it, right, and it comes out of this tube this way. Right, fresh air from outside, minus 20 air, down the tube. There's an airflow sensor, and then it sucks it into there, right, rams it into the engine, and that's what gives you your extra boost. And this is your breather tube outlet, pressure release, which all looks good. There's no splits in anything. We're going to clean that lot up as well, and then we'll reassemble it. Meanwhile, I'll look at the footage on here to see if that turbo looks all right. Alright. Okay. I know I've already checked this 60 times today, but I'll just do it again, just because it's good. Spot on, perfect. Right. I don't think there's anything else I can do. Yeah, is that the first time I've worked on one of these? Yeah, it is. Even to the extent, that's the very first time I've ever seen you have to use a key to open a bonnet, boot, hood, trunk. Right, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, key. Yeah, you have to put it in the front there. Blew my mind, that did. Blew my mind. Right. Not the easiest engine to be working on. If that all sounds like an earthquake, it isn't. It's the log train full of logs. It gets much worse in the winter. Much, much, much worse. And much worse the colder it gets, because the permafrost layer freezes solid between us and the railway line, and it vibrates the building badly. Well, so much so that it just knocked a small piece of timber off of the bandsaw there. Anyway, that's it. I don't know if I fixed it. I don't know what was broke. I don't know if it'll fail again. I don't know what was wrong. We had a little dig in there. We had a little clean up. We checked the bits that are obvious. I had a little look on the footage inside the turbo there. It looks brand new. So, you know, perfect. That was that. What's disappointing is I was going to do a bit of a feature for the weekend. I was about going to the city at Christmas. My glasses, my eyesight, there's a whole story to my eyesight. Anyway, that was Sarah's Christmas present to me, so yeah, do I need them? Badly, so badly, I can't tell you how badly I need glasses. And Wednesday's video, which I should announce last week, I announced the buy me a coffee thing to help me out for the media. Those that have already paid and bought me a coffee, obviously it's not going for a coffee, it's going towards some media equipment I need to make this channel better. Can't believe it. Thank you very much. I really, really do mean that. I appreciate it so much. So we got a bit of a ways to go to get what we need, but it's a start, and I really do appreciate giving money for sometimes questionable entertainment. Anyway, entertainment aside, right, I've missed my trip to the city, which I'd planned for 2 days. And what's interesting about that is I can't really leave the building when it's that cold. We switched on all the electric elements this morning before we left the building, which we haven't done since 2017. And there's a reason we haven't done it since 2017, is we got an electric bill in 2017. That was a small mortgage. Right. I can't do no more except run it. So I think it was some sort of brain fart created by the extreme temperature this morning that this just don't like. Maybe I should, you know, like we did on the Volkswagen, cover up the front of the grille. Yeah, maybe that's the idea. Although, yeah, maybe we should do that. Anyway, thank you all for joining me. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now. There you go. That should do it. It's not pretty. Not pretty at all. Not as pretty as that is.